Hello, YouTube. So, we are back with episode 8, House of the Dragon review. And before we get further into the stream and my thoughts on the episode as a whole, I will say, just generally, I think this is probably my favorite episode of the series so far. I think they did a lot of things right that I liked. I think they did some good things with some of the characters. I think we saw probably the best acting of the entire episode. So that is my general thoughts before we actually get into going through each individual scene and all that stuff. Again, for viewers that did not notice this last week, we are doing the review streams the day after, just because you guys want more in depth as we go through every single scene and all of that. So I'm going to kind of wait a little bit for people to come into the stream before we start getting deep into the actual episode. But let me know what you guys thought. Did you like the episode? I'm assuming a lot of you did, because I put out a poll on YouTube and I talked about I asked you guys what your guys' thoughts were on the episode. And here's the statistics of the votes. Out of 310 votes, you guys thought it was a 9 out of 10 for 70% of that. So that's probably like a good 200-ish, about 210, I think, of that was 9 out of 10, one of the best. Another 21% said pretty good, 7 to 8 out of 10. And then there was about 9% of you that put the episode at a mid or weaker or awful side of that. So as a whole, the episode was pretty positive from feedback from the community. I have my own little gripes with it that are minor, but could affect the rest of the show. But for the most part, I love this episode. It was a 9 out of 10 for me. That episode was best that episode was best that All of Throne has to offer. I don't agree, Jim. I think yes. I think from House of the Dragon standpoint, I would say yeah. I think it's probably the best. But I think there are other episodes in Game of Thrones that are better. I think like The Reigns of Castamere will always be better than that particular episode. We could see some things in the future overtake it. Maybe. I don't know about that, but it was a good episode, I will say. The shot with Aemond and the pig was great. Agreed. Very good moment and really good attention to detail to bring back the pig. Also, something that's interesting is later on in the episode, when they're at the little feast hall or whatever, right, for the whole family, there is this shot that is very much from Fire and Blood. There's a picture of Rhaenyra and Allison, and in the picture that the art is done, they're looking away, but it's very similar to the way the show did it, where they're both like, there's a seat empty in the middle of them, and they're kind of off to the side. So, and then the big thing here is there's a pig that's on the table in that little shot or art. So it was really cool. They kind of brought a couple things in there. So, best episode. I agree with you, Glossy. I agree. So it was a really great episode. My favorite scene was Daemon helping Viserys. Yeah, I loved that scene. I think that was my favorite scene of the entire series, probably. It was just a really great payoff. It was really awesome because I wasn't sure where they were going with it. Just in general, like I wasn't sure where they were going to go with how the Vaemond plot was kind of concluded. I knew how it was going to end. I didn't know how we were going to get there. And seeing the way that they paid a lot of tribute to Viserys and kind of gave him a good last hurrah episode. And I really liked that. The crowned prince has arrived. Hi, Matthew, as well. Also, Glossy, Billy Bob wanted me to tell you best wishes because he will not be in the stream. So, yeah. I know Cole is unlikable, but they diminish his character a bit. I think they have him lose to Harmon and Aemond. He is supposed to be, or Aemond, he is supposed to be the best fighter in Westeros at this point. Yeah, that's a fair point. That's a fair point. And also, it's like the way their fighting styles are, it's kind of odd that Kristen Cole would ever lose to someone like Aemond because he has the one eye. So, like, how would he see his Morning Star on that side? It is a little interesting when you think about it. Before we get anything, I will say I think Daron might have been cut. Same with Maelor. I think Daron is going to be a season 2 character. I think they will give his storyline to Helena, maybe. I haven't looked at the preview, so again, I guess we'll look at that at the end of the episode. But I will have to look at that. Not sure which episode is better than this one or this one or episode 1. Really? You think this or episode 1? So for me, I have as of right now, right? As of right now, I have this with my rankings with like 9 out of 10 or whatever. I have 3 episodes that were, I believe, 9 out of 10s. So I had episode 2 as a 9 out of 10, and episode 4 as a 9 out of 10, and then this episode as a 9 out of 10. So yeah. Yeah, I think the consensus is that we're gonna see him in season 2 because they show like his bloodstream in the intro, so it'd be kind of weird if he wasn't there. Also, he's probably in Old Town, being fostered, so that would kind of make sense. I kind of agree, Glossy, but they do that with a lot of characters. I feel like. Hi Ian, how are you? Superheated that you weren't on this last time to spoil. Yeah. So, Ian, I will say, basically, I did this idea, or not idea, but we had this discussion, I think after episode 6, where I asked chat if they wanted me to do streams right after the episode or do it the next day. And the only reason I would do it next day is because I could have a longer, detailed, more of a stream instead of it just being my first reactions to it. Because if I do the first reaction streams directly after the episode, it's going to be a bit less structured and or organized. Because what I end up doing is basically I will pause after every individual scene, take down some notes on my initial thoughts of each thing so I can pick up more from the episodes and all that. So, for instance, I have about 3.5 to 4 pages worth of a Google Doc filled with just notes about the episode. And we're going to go through every single scene in the episode. So the way I'd been doing it before was I would just kind of talk about the episode in general, and we'd have some questions from chat, and we'd go like that way. But it seemed like most of the fans or, you guys, community, wanted it to be the Rings of Power style. You know what's so funny is I am doing it the Rings of Power way, because when I started doing Rings of Power, this is the way I would do it with Rings of Power, but yeah, maybe. Hi, Metal, how are you? All right, so now that, we got some people in here, let's start into scene 1. So right off the bat, we're already told that this is a 6-year time skip. Right off the bat, it's kind of like, I think Rhaenys is basically talking to Vaemond, and she's like, she hasn't seen Corlys in 6 years, so that would imply it's about a 6-year time skip. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure it was about 6 years. So we have a 6-year time skip. And again, I have problems with the time skip. This is one of my very few negatives of the episode. But there's a lot that we missed within this time skip, right? In the book, Fire and Blood, as you guys know, it was very much made apparent that Daemon marrying Rhaenyra was really bad. Like, Viserys was pissed. This had a very big ripple effect on Westeros at that time, and we really don't get any of that. Like, it's not even really almost mentioned outside of, like, Rhaenys kind of talks about it a little bit later, but it's weird. It's weird that we don't see Viserys' reaction to it. We don't see how Westeros reacts to it. Like, it's not like her and Laenor, where, like, we kind of see a lot of people reacting to the relationship, stuff like that. Just kind of accepted at this point, I guess. So I thought that was a little weird. Another thing I thought was a little weird is, as we'll talk about later, is Rhaenyra and Allison's relationship is another one of my negatives of this episode. Just because, like, at the end of episode 7, it seems like both sides are preparing for a war or actively wanting a war. Okay? And this episode does a lot to revert that, which I'm not sure why they did that. Because if you look at how episode 8 is going, or how it ends, Viserys is dead. So if there's going to be a conflict, it's going to happen at this point. So why revert all your tension and then try to... I don't know. So that's one of my other negatives I'm going to talk about in the episode a little bit later on. But those are kind of my big negatives. I thought Daemon, for once, I have no complaints with Daemon in this episode, really. There's a scene that was a little interesting that they changed from the book that. I think the book did a much better, but we'll see. Post the episode is better. The emotions are fresh, and I think it gives them. See, that's like the balance of it, right? One of them you get my more just straight up thoughts and my emotions to it, and the other one you get me more thinking on the episode, right? You hear more of my actual marinated thoughts on it, because coming out of the episode, I was very positive about it, and I still am very positive about it, but there's things that after I think about them a bit more, I'm not so sure about. And Allison is going to be one of those characters that I'm not so sure about because of things they did with her character that kind of undermine what they'd already established about her character. So that's one thing I will talk about when we get there, but yeah. I usually like to watch it straight through, no interruptions the first time, then take notes on a second watch. That makes sense, Matthew. So it is 6 years, okay. I want to make sure on that. And then, hi, Ashley, how are you? So, that is kind of our first little thing. We have Rhaenys talking about Corlys and how they just got the news, basically, that he was wounded, and he's also coming over with a sickness. I believe in Fire and Blood, and it's just that he is kind of old, and he has some sort of sickness that they think he's going to die, which leads to this whole plot. But, again, I can see why they did that as well. Moving on. We have so Vaemond, I think, is a very sympathetic character in this episode, because Vaemond is really telling the truth, and he is actually quite honest about. Well, okay, let me put it this way: we understand his motives, but at the same time, he also kind of just wants the throne for himself, right? He talks about how the Velaryon line would die if it went through Luke, right? And while he's kind of correct, he's not really correct, as we'll talk about later on, but we understand his motivations, right? Luke is not a Velaryon. He doesn't really have any right to sit the throne. So when I say throne, I mean the Driftwood throne, not the throne. But we understand kind of his motivations, and I really like the way they did his character. He is one of those characters that makes a lot of sense, and I like in this episode. I think I was kind of interested to see how they would do his character, but I think they did a really great job. So I like that characterization. Moving on. I also like, so as we go to, or as they start talking about King's Landing and how they're going to go there and bring up this, conflict about who is going to take the Driftwood throne after Corlys, we already know that King's Landing is not really in the same shape as it was before the time skip. Before the time skip, Viserys was still pretty much in control, but he was, he was getting more manipulated, and Allison was being able to get away with things and taking a little bit more control. We see that Vaemond says that Allison and the Hightowers are in control of King's Landing. And that's a really good job of setting up the scene where we understand what the main conflict of the episode is going to be. And also, we understand how the environment has changed, and most notably King's Landing, because we really only have 3 places the story ever takes place. One of my big negatives of the entire season is it kind of feels very small compared to something like Game of Thrones. But with all that being said, that kind of transitions us into scene 2 with Dragonstone. All right, let me get back into chat. Anybody else think it's weird how all these people who worship the Seven keep hanging out in front of the werewolf? Yeah, that is kind of odd. Maybe they're trying to tie it into the main series with like saying, oh, Bran's watching or Bloodraven's watching. Not sure on that. Truth be told, on how they are doing the season, I think they should have just started the series the first times jump and just have mentions on what happened in the first few episodes. I mean, I like seeing it all fleshed out, but that's because I'm a really big book fan of this, and I love the idea of seeing all these characters in their fullness, because this is my favorite time period in Targaryen history and all that stuff. So when you leave out certain things that are actually pretty huge to the story, for me anyway, it is a little frustrating. I like how they're showing more of the faith influence. Yeah, and that's a big thing that Allison plays into in this episode, where she has this kind of lash out and this kind of couldn't keep her composure, right, in the last episode. And she kind of goes and leans more into the faith to kind of cover that up. So, yeah. I'm calling it now. Adam and Alan are Vaemond's sons and will take the place of the 2 legitimate sons he has in the books who weren't cast in the show. Okay. I could see that. I don't like that the fact that the main contenders, Rhaenyra and Aegon II, have not spoken to each other once in the show. I agree. I think maybe they should have developed that a bit more, because the relationship in Fire and Blood is a bit different. But I do think that would have been nice to see. And I think this is the problem with having a 10-episode season 1, is that there's so many interactions between characters that would be really cool to see before things start to break out that we didn't get to see. Like we didn't really see anything about, like, there's a certain part in this episode that really shows you why the time skip really, or the multiple time skips, has affected the show. There's this idea where Rhaenys and Rhaenyra are talking, and it's something we're going to get to very shortly, where Rhaenyra, it seems like for the first time in 6 years, tells Rhaenys, I didn't kill Laenor and all these things. It's like, wait, you're just telling him or telling her this now? I don't know if it's one of those things where, like, she's saying it again, like, that Rhaenys has just held on to these feelings even though Rhaenyra has said something about it. I don't know. So those are some interesting things that I don't really understand. Patty C is the man. I hope we get flashbacks. He is the man. I don't know if we're going to get flashbacks or not. And in a way, given who inherits the Driftwood throne, Vaemond will get what he died for. That's fair. No, because them not telling Rhaenys is so stupid. I think they should have told Rhaenys a long time ago, or at least told her the plan. I think it would have helped. I don't know. I like that they Aegon and II and Rhaenyra haven't. It may lead to internal conflict within the two of them if they're trying to take the throne from the other, but have no personal problems with them. I mean, I think Aegon doesn't even. The thing with Aegon is he doesn't even want the throne. So, like, he's not going to have any ill will towards the other person, probably regardless, just because he doesn't really want the throne. It's more like he's being forced to do so, which is something that comes out during the scene later on in the episode with the dining thing where they're having dinner. It's all of the kids creating the problems and not really the adults. Yeah, I also wanted to see an Aegon the Conqueror flashback. That would have been really cool, but we have not. So let's move into scene 2. So scene 2 starts with a really nice sky shot of Dragonstone. It looked really awesome. Really one of my favorite landscape shots we've kind of seen from the show, but it looked really good. And then we have this kind of montage where Daemon is kind of climbing to get these dragon eggs, and he gets 3 eggs by Syrax. It's a pretty cool scene. We haven't actually seen much of this happen at all. Actually, I don't think we've seen any of this happen before, where it's a character getting an egg. Like, we haven't seen it in really the book. We haven't really seen it in the show. So it's a nice kind of thing we haven't seen before. The next thing we have here is Baela sends a letter to Daemon about Corlys's condition. So we kind of figure out what's going on there. We learn that Rhaenyra and Daemon have actually had kids. So there's a lot to unpack here for people that don't know what's supposed to happen. But this kind of leads into Rhaenyra and Jace. And Jace is trying to learn High Valyrian, which is interesting because there's actually really not a big use to that in this society. Like, him learning Valyrian would just be kind of for the dragons, I guess. But it is interesting to show how Jace is kind of a perfectionist. He's trying to be the best version of himself and trying to be a good heir and or king in the future. And that's something I really like. It's a very stark contrast from Jace and Aegon, where Aegon doesn't want to be the king. He's not someone that is trying to be the king. He's very irresponsible. Jace is kind of the opposite, where Jace is kind of going into that role of he is going to be the heir and the king, and he's trying to do his best to learn how to be a good king. So that is a really good difference that I like between the two, and they really expand on that in this episode particularly. Also, we get a little tiny shot, but we see little Joffrey. So that was pretty cool. He's just kind of sitting on the ground. We see him for a half a second, but that was pretty cool. It's a good little introduction for him. And also, I like the scene with. Wait, hold on. What did I write here? Oh no. So we then get Rhaenyra and Daemon kind of discussing Vaemond's death, or not Vaemond's death, but Vaemond having the issue or whatever. They're talking about Corlys possibly dying, and I like that this is brought up here that Rhaenys is probably gonna know there's something up with Laenar's death. I like that is kind of an idea here, because Rhaenys would be smart enough to see that, okay, these two get married right after he's quote unquote dead. Kind of seems like there's something up here. So I like that they continue to play on Rhaenys as being a very smart character and a very wise character, and someone that's able to kind of see through deception and stuff like that. So I like that idea. But then again, this is something I bring up I've already brought up in the stream, but I was really disappointed that we didn't see anyone's reaction to their marriage, especially Viserys. Like, it's a major plot point that they just kind of brushed over. Like, even when we get Viserys in this episode and he talks with Rhaenyra and Daemon, there's nothing there. Like, it just seems like he just accepted it and was like, yeah, sure, why not? Like, remember, this is the same Daemon that Viserys did not want to be on the throne, and by Daemon marrying Rhaenyra, he will end up on the throne. Like, that is a big point of conflict in Fire and Blood that they really didn't touch at all. So I thought that was a kind of a miss from them, but whatever. Can I ask about something that happens in the book but hasn't happened in the show yet? Yeah, go ahead. This is not where we talk kind of a lot of spoilers on this channel about things that happen in the future. I'm not too worried about that. And then they end up going to King's Landing. Also, I hope you guys like the new Daemon, like, goblin art I had made. I think it looks pretty solid. It's a little bit different styled than some of my other ones, where it's more look like a drawing artistic version, while the other one kind of looks more like a cartoonish version, I guess. But I liked that I had it done for the channel just because of, I think Daemon's pretty cool and all that. And I wanted to add something for House of the Dragon. I kind of had something for Game of Thrones and Rings of Power, but I didn't really have anything for House of the Dragon. I think Viserys is just too old and weak to do anything about it, so may as well not have a bad relationship while he's alive. That's fair. But I think it would have been nice if, like, Viserys or Daemon or somebody would have referenced that he had a problem with it within the future. Or in the past. He had some issue with what happened. I agree. It would have been very nice, but Viserys was hardly in any condition to have the conversation during the episode. Maybe if they had had it at the end of episode 7. Yeah. Well, my thing is, like, it would have been cool if they would have at least mentioned it. Like, maybe like Rhaenyra and Daemon, while they're talking about kind of the Corlys problem, they're like, also we're kind of in hot water. Viserys did not like that we were, wedded and stuff like that. So and then, like, maybe build up some unease of how they're going to be received because of things that happened off screen or whatever, right? I don't know. I think that would have been nice. Am I the only one who feels like we still don't get enough Rhaenys? I think we got a decent amount of Rhaenys in this episode, and I was kind of happy that she was introduced in it. She's not the main character of the series, so they're not going to spend a ton of time with her. But I do really like Rhaenys' scenes. I think they're always good scenes, and I would always open to more Rhaenys scenes. Good episode. Wasn't sure about Aemon's casting, but I like Baby Monk so far. Yeah, that was something that's so weird to think about. Is like, I loved the Baby Monk from The Last Kingdom. I love the actor that plays him. So Aemond, for instance, is one of my least favorite. Like, not least favorite. I hate him because of what side he's on and kind of who he is as a person. And I really, like, I can't help it. I just kind of like Aemond. And it's just like, every fire in my body is like, no, you're not allowed to like Aemond. And I'm just like, but he's the Baby Monk, though. It's so hard. That was one of the facts about the last episode I didn't like, because in Fire and Blood, it's 6 months after Laena's death when they get married, if I remember. Yeah, I'm pretty sure in the book, it's not directly after. Like, it's like a couple months or something like that. So it's just even more odd. Like, it's even more odd that they get married literally the night he dies. Like, yeah. I like the music in Viserys' entrance scene. Was it the song that they play that plays when Robert? I actually don't remember, Jesse, on that. I don't know. I might have to rewatch and I'll tell you that. Yeah, I think Rhaenys is just a great character, and I like her character. It's gonna be a roller coaster of emotions. That's all I'll say. So scene 3 starts with Rhaenyra and Daemon coming to King's Landing, and they get a very cold welcome. Like, there's nobody here. Like, not a single soul is here to receive them. And I thought that was good. I think it establishes that the Greens have basically taken complete control of King's Landing. Now, I will say it's not really book canon, because book canon, like even when Rhaenyra leaves, like there's still black support in King's Landing. So this, like, we're not even like in war conflict yet. For there to be nobody here for Rhaenyra or Daemon kind of seems a little odd. But I'm cool with it because it establishes kind of what King's Landing is like at the moment. So I thought that was a fine change. What if the Seven Kingdoms split after the rebellion? Hoster is smart enough to know that his bannermen overshadow him, so he gives his fealty to Eddard, making him King of the North and Trident. I just don't think that would have ever happened, because you're saying after the rebellion, after Robert's rebellion, you have to think Ned and Robert are basically brothers. Like, Ned was, yes, a little pissed off at Rob at the end of the conflict, but he would never have just succeeded from the Seven Kingdoms when basically someone like his brother's on the throne. It just doesn't make sense for Ned. I don't know. That one just, it wouldn't make much sense just in general. Now what could make a bit more sense is that instead of them trying to go for the crown, the North, the Trident, the Vale, and like the Stormlands, they just kind of say, screw it, we're not part of the Seven Kingdoms anymore. That would be something more realistic, but that would be really cool, Matthew, about Alexander Draymond. That'd be cool. What do you think about Rhaenyra coming back as Adam of Hull after hearing about his mother's death? It's been many years and he might get away with people not knowing his true identity. Maybe, but like, you're trying to tell, like, you basically have to say that like people that were very close to him don't know him. I can't buy it. I can't buy that. I don't know. I don't like that idea. I don't like Rhaenyra even being alive. And I'm going to talk about that at the very end, because I think there's things that you can tell the direction of this episode was to revert Allison's character to being a bit more likable and making us understand her motives a little bit more. But the problem with that is you've already established Allison as being the more villainous of the two sides and the Greens being more the villains. When you start reverting their characters, it just doesn't make sense, right? We just talked about last episode how Allison and Otto are actively trying to get war, and how Allison is complicit in murders. Like, you can't start reverting now. It's too late. Like, I don't know. We're gonna talk about it later because I have a problem with Allison's character, but we'll see. And I really like the idea that Rhaenyra feels like an outsider in King's Landing. You have to remember she hasn't lived here in quite a bit of time, right? So this kind of doesn't feel like her home anymore, right? And it's interesting. I like that they play on that, and really, because it makes you feel like the characters actually have aged quite a bit. Like, that this is not really her home anymore. This feels like, oh, you moved from somewhere and you're coming back and you're like, yeah, on the outside it kind of looks similar, but it's not the same place anymore, right? So I like that they played on that idea, and that Allison is in full power of ruling. Like, she's basically just taken over, right? So I thought that was good. Now, something I think is a contradiction to that is that Otto Hightower is the one sitting on the throne during the whole, like, trial thing, which doesn't really make any sense because everybody's saying Allison's in control. And even Otto Hightower is having to convince Allison to do things, but yet Otto Hightower is in control technically. So it's a really weird thing that's kind of a nitpick, but it's kind of a little weird when it comes to that. Sorry, I hit my mic. Also, they have this small council meeting, and I thought it was really good because it shows kind of the corruption and how the starting of the Green Council. It does a lot of foreshadowing to what we'll see in next episode. So I thought that was really good, and I like that it subtly foreshadows later events where there's only really one person in this entire council it's kind of on Rhaenyra's side almost, or isn't completely blindly following the Greens. So I thought that was really good. I liked that. What if the rebels decided to split from the Seven Kingdoms? So that's an interesting one now. So if the rebels split from the Seven Kingdoms, they're fighting more of a defensive war, theoretically, in that situation. So the question would be, okay, let's say they beat the forces of the Targaryens to some degree. Maybe the Lannisters still flip sides and they just end up ruling the Seven Kingdoms while the other lands for the moment are off by themselves. I'm not sure how that would go. There's a lot of what ifs in that situation. Like, how would Littlefinger do things? How would, like, that's a tough one. Would Rhaegar still die? Like, a lot of things going on there. Because if that was to happen, let's say the rebels just split from the Seven Kingdoms, right? Maybe Rhaegar just deposes his father, then takes over the crown, and maybe, but even then, I think Robert was so vengeful, and if all that was going on, I think he still would have wanted to kill Rhaegar. So it's a tough situation to predict in that situation. Not to mention you lose the elements of not all bastards are turncloaks. That's a good point, Ashley. Aegon raped someone and Allison wants to make him king. Seems irritating. Yeah, like, that's my thing, is that they keep pushing this idea that the Greens are doing some very questionable things, like Aegon's raping someone, whatever. Allison is basically blackmailing the girl, manipulating like Cersei would. But then they try to say that she's, they try to making her more good as well. And it's like, at this point, it's like, why? Why? It doesn't really make any sense. I agree, Matthew. I don't think the show would care about selling a point that we've seen previously with Jon Snow. That's fair. Hey Jordan, how are you? Who is in the Green Council with a beard who is talking to Lords Beesbury? I also thought it was William Riker, so I don't know. That's kind of who I was gonna go with, but I'm not sure actually. Hand of the Queen and Commander of the Queen's Guard. Hello, Young Wolf. How are you? But yeah, so we have this little council. They're kind of talking about everything. And we kind of get this idea that they're going to talk with Vaemond, right? Otto and Allison. They're going to have a little talk. They're going to see what they're going to be able to get out of this. And I like that the setup for this episode is really that the Greens are trying to not only strip an ally of Rhaenyra, but also getting the good old Velaryons on their side as well. So you really love to see how the Greens are manipulating this event. Oh, Jesse. I'm going to be honest. I don't know who that guy was, and I just basically went off of whatever you were saying. I'm going to be honest. I didn't know who it was. But, yeah. Moving on. Also, we have some good... There's this one thing the episode did really well. They did a lot of foreshadowing that is very important that they identify here, right? So we have this idea that Allison mistakes the twins, which is really good setup for something that's going to happen later on in the story. And I just like that. It was something that took 2 seconds, and they established an interesting little plot point that's going to happen later on. So I like that. Also, we see Rhaenyra and Daemon going to see Viserys. So love to see that. And we see how much Viserys is kind of struggling, how his physical condition has deteriorating. And it's kind of hard to see, right? Not hard to see as in, like, you can't see him, but, like, it's just, like, it's rough to see our boy Viserys in this state. Really not doing so hot. And I like the kind of 2 ways we see this, where Rhaenyra is very sympathetic, where she's very concerned about Viserys, and Daemon's kind of just trying to get to the point. Like, Viserys, we're here. We need you to kind of take control of the realm, and you gotta, like, make sure Luke is, given the Velaryon Driftwood throne. Like, he's very kind of serious about it, and Rhaenyra is kind of the opposite approach. So we love seeing that dynamic with dealing with the whole problem and how Daemon is more direct with the conflict. Also, this is a theme we're going to see that the entire episode, and it's going to be great acting by Patty. He did such a great job in this episode. They might be doing the same thing with Allison that they did with Damon. Yeah, that's kind of a problem. Is that certain characters just flip flop depending on what episode it is. I don't know. Well, let's check this. What Glossy's put in the chat here. I want to see what we got here. So they put out the official family trees, and Daron is not on here. That's not what you like to see. I'm just assuming that they are waiting for his character in season 2. That is what I'm going to say. I'm not sure if that is true, but I'm going to assume it's going to be number 2. It's Iron Rod, isn't it? Could be. I don't know. That would make sense if it was. And yes, rip our boy Viserys. Okay, so moving on. Now, this is something that I thought was interesting, right? Because we never saw Aegon or Viserys, right? So these are the children of Daemon and Rhaenyra. We didn't see them at the beginning of the episode, and then Daemon kind of does this weird thing where he like rubs her stomach like she's pregnant again. So I had assumed that that Viserys wasn't born yet, but we actually do see child Aegon and Viserys, and they are so cute. I just wanted to point that out. They look good. You know, they look good, healthy kids, and you love to see that. And they get shown to Viserys. Now, something that's interesting here is that they both start kind of like crying and stuff as soon as they like are introduced to Viserys, which is an interesting little tidbit. Like, you know, Viserys is kind of rotting. You know, the things he's done is going to create a lot of problems, and it's a nice little scene. You know, it's a nice little scene where, you know, Viserys gets to see Aegon. For people that know what happens, it's kind of a significant little thing to see. It was really cool. Yeah, Patty's performance was really good. The changes are not good. The characterization of many players are way off. Now, I kind of agree on certain things, right? Like characterizations of trying to make both sides likable or understanding where they're coming from. It's just not there. Like, if you want to come at it from the idea of who is more morally correct or who is in the right here, it's very hard to make a case for the Greens. Very hard. Because you just look at any type of crime, any type of anything, it's all on the Green side. Like, they really haven't set up Rhaenyra to be any type of villain. Like, they haven't set up, like, think about, okay, so let's think about how Vaemon dies book to show comparison. In the book, Vaemon starts, you know, saying some stuff, and basically Rhaenyra tells Daemon, yeah, go get that dude, and then they basically, I think does she cut his tongue off and then have her dragon eat him? Or is it she cut his head off and then lets the dragon... It's something like that. But it's a lot more cruel. It's a lot more like, yeah, we just straight up murdered this dude. Even though, yeah, he was spouting stuff that could be considered treason. In the show, it's kind of like he openly says treason and dies. And it's not because of Rhaenyra. It's Daemon that does it. So, I don't know. There's some things that are a little interesting. They haven't really developed Rhaenyra's character to be morally gray, in my opinion. Let me go back up here. Was she not pregnant? I thought she looked pregnant, and you guys are saying that it's like her daughter that ends up dying, which makes sense. That makes sense. I just like was like, is she not pregnant? Because they didn't really mention it at all. Like, it was one thing where like Daemon puts his hand on her stomach, which I was like, okay, she's probably pregnant, right? And then they never mention it ever again. So that's why I was a little confused on that idea. Yeah. Yeah, his head definitely must have been hurting there, metal. She named her Visenya, I think, because of course she did. Yes, you may be correct there, J Lord. I just didn't want to say it. Not gonna lie, I really wasn't feeling the show until this latest episode. Makes sense. I could see why you wouldn't. Why did you not like it up to this point? Words 789. What was your idea of why you didn't like it? Was it too quick? Was it too, we didn't get enough action going on? Why do you think that? Without that, the Greens have no real redeeming qualities. I kind of agree. I think she had his men's tongues cut off. Oh, okay, that can make sense, Metal. I feel let's look up. Hold on, we need to look up how Vaemond dies real quick in the book. Let's look at how he dies. I know it's something like somebody gets their tongues removed. In response, Rhaenyra dispatched her new husband, Prince Daemon, to seize Sir Vaemond. She had his head removed and fed his carcass to her dragon. Okay. And then his 5 younger cousins had their tongues removed afterwards by King Viserys Targaryen. Yeah, so it's a little darker in the books, which we do not see in the show at all, which again keeps painting Rhaenyra as the protagonist. But, making Aegon a rapist was not really a good move if they wanted to make this conflict great. Agreed. The youngest kids aren't relevant enough to the story to be taking up real screen time yet. They just wanted us to know they're there and move on. Fair. Like, not gonna lie, when Ryan Connell called Aegon a complex, great character, I rolled my eyes because making a character. Yeah. So this is my thing, right? Is Aegon is a complex character until you did dumb things with his character, right? Having him rape someone, not a good look. Not a good. He's just not great. Not great. Right? And they have a good foundation for his character outside of things like that. Right? Where he's a character that's being pushed into this role that he doesn't want to. He is someone that feels like he is kind of a disappointment to his mother. He is abused by his mother. His mother hits him. Like, he has all the foundations to be a very gray character, but they've kind of gone a different route with him. So, hey, don't get me wrong, Young Wolf. I do not like the Greens, okay? I think there's some scum, but yeah. Nothing was happening up until these last 2 episodes drama-wise. I guess I could see that. I think that there's just the problem with the show. Not even the problem, is there's just a lot of things that they have to cover that a lot of it, if you're not invested into it, can feel like filler. So I completely can see where you're coming from. I've made a lot of references to the later seasons of Game of Thrones because there's such minor things that they don't do that should be in there, right? We don't see Viserys and Allison's wedding. There are scenes we don't see between Alice and Rhaenyra that are cut that are very pivotal to the story. But at the same time, I wouldn't say it's the level of those seasons because I think the dialogue, the acting, the actual plot is a bit better than those later seasons of Game of Thrones. But I definitely see where you're coming with that. I mean, look at the one major action scene we've gotten in the Stepstones. Felt a lot like the Battle of the Bastards with Jon, where there's arrows coming down. There's all those things going around him. He's not dying or anything like that. He's not taking any injuries. Kind of felt like Daemon and that. So I definitely see where you're coming from on that. I agree with you, Shot, though, on Joffrey's book death. Well, the War in the Stepstones was supposed to happen, but they skipped it. Yeah, fair. They skipped it not only once, they skipped it twice. So, Indeed, they just made both Aegon and Aemond bad. Agreed. Technically Tyrion raped Tysa, so is he redeemable? I mean, I would say he is a villain or a anti-hero. So is he ever going to be a hero? I don't think so. And that's something that's very different from the show, where the show he didn't do that. So I don't know. Blood and cheese might not even happen. If that doesn't happen, I will be very pissed. I'm not going to lie. Okay, so Marco, I think what we're trying to say here is that it makes sense for Aegon to be that way, but the showrunners are trying to say he's morally gray. Like, Aegon in the book, to me, he's the same kind of way as well, but he's never portrayed as being a morally, like, gray character. He's just kind of the villain, right? There's characters in the green side of it that are, like Daeron is one of somebody that is not, like his brothers or anything like that. So, I don't know. Yeah, Daemon is definitely more evil in the show. He has every bad rumor that's ever talked about him, like, it just amplified, right? Like, so there's so many situations, and I talk about this a lot in the book, where he's kind of mentioned as maybe he's a suspect of something, or maybe he did this, but we're not sure. And the show took that as, yeah, he did every one of these things, every plot he's involved in, he was the one that did it. Like, he's definitely more evil in the show. Agreed, Ashley. I do think that foreshadows that. Well, the books, there is a lot of suspects for who killed the Strongs. For one, the Clubfoot is a candidate for that, so he could take the Strongs, gain power, or take the Strongs, not take the Strongs. He'd be the leader of the Strongs, he would inherit Harrenhal. He would have a lot to gain from it. Corlys and Daemon also are implied that they possibly could have done it. Viserys is even possibly a candidate that could have done it to eliminate the rumors there. There's so many different. Otto Hightower could have been somebody. There's so many different characters that are involved with possibly doing that. So yeah. I'm not sure which kid has the tail, by the way, Ian. I agree. IDK, why they had to add that in? He's always been a lustful character and cheats on Helena, but why they added? I don't know. Sorry, but there's no way I can look at Rhaenyra as a good guy for putting it. So that's the thing, though. We're not sure if she did. I think it's much more likely that Rhaenyra helped Laenor escape. But I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe it was like Laenor just, they made the plan up. I don't know. Maybe him and Carl, like, they figured out this was going on and they just left. I don't know. I think they tried to portray Daemon as an anti-hero, but at this point, Daemon is a villain. Like, that's how I look at his character. Like, I like him, but he's a villain. Like, he's not an anti-hero at this point. I mean, Lady Gonzo, the way you would say both sides are gray is that you go, okay, Daemon is kind of a villain, so that adds that side, and do you want him on the throne, right? But at the same time, like, if you look at the green, and yes, Rhaenyra has lied or stuff like that, and maybe her children aren't legitimate. But at the same time, Rhaenyra herself has committed no, like, that we know of, right? That we know of. We don't know exactly what happened with Rhaenyra, but she has not really done anything that you would consider, like, terrible moral decision, right? Like, really bad, like, oh, she is complicit in murders. She is trying to actively start a war that's going to get thousands of people killed. Like, if you look at the green side of it, right? Allison, as a mother, is a terrible mother. Like, she's terrible. Like, she's pushing her children into things that she doesn't want them to do, or that they don't want to do. She kind of hates her children to some degree. We're gonna get to later where Allison basically, uses the line. I hated that they did this. That they used the line that "you are no son of mine" line with Aegon, and I'm like, that was not the time for that. That I didn't like that at all. But they make Allison out to be like such a just bad person, but then they try to revert her. It's so weird to me. And you look at Otto, who is just a warmonger at this point. At this point, he is someone that is literally just actively trying to start a war. That is his goal, to put his family in a better position. Aegon is a rapist. Aemond, as of right now, Aemond's fine, but he's kind of a cruel dude that just kind of wants to kill people. Alina's like the only like innocent one. She's just kind of, just weird. But it's hard to make the argument that both sides are morally gray when one side is significantly darker than the other side is. Like, if you took Daemon out of it, right, and say Rhaenyra was still married to Laenor, or he died somehow, like, there's no morally gray on both sides. Like, it's really just the green side of it. Yeah, Viserys looked terrible. They already, yeah, that's fair. John, I didn't think about that, but that's fair. They did already kill an innocent person. That is fair. That's fair shot. I forgot about that. That's a good point. That's a good point. I think it could be related to Blood and Cheese, but I think it could be like to the, if we talk about the rat, like green seer type thing, with Clubfoot, that could also be a reference to that. So, words, I think the only reason I'm willing to accept it, I think it was a little weird, is that, for one, Viserys did just threaten to cut his tongue out, and he was speaking treason, and basically actively, like, saying, I'm not going to follow your word, Viserys, which is treason, and also attacking Rhaenyra's side or camp. And the other part you have to think about here is, Viserys doesn't want to piss anyone off, right? If he was to imprison Daemon here, that's going to create a conflict again that he doesn't want. Why, right? And at this point, Vaemond was probably pissing Viserys off. He didn't care, right? So that's probably why. And that's why I'm kind of okay with accepting that idea. Daemon's actor was great. I agree, Wiley. I agree. They will try to make Rhaenyra be. I don't think they're trying. I think she is the hero. Like, out of the two main characters, she is definitely the hero. And she's been. Think about how they frame everything, right? In the feast that we're going to get later, right? Who is the first one to make a toast and or peace? Who is the person that has tried to make a peace even later or earlier on, right? Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra is the first person to be like, I'm thankful for, to you, Allison, that you've been able to, help my father in these things and all these stuff, trying to make peace with her. Allison does her thing after Rhaenyra. So Rhaenyra, in almost every sense of the word, is being painted as the hero or the protagonist. Agreed, shot. Agreed. Yes, in the book. So this is my thing. If you look at the comparison of the characters from book to show, Rhaenyra is much more morally gray in the book than she is in the show. There is much more, and this is why it's such a great, idea in the book, is there's much more going on. The characters are much more complex than they are in the show to certain degrees that make both sides very interesting. Because she, like I said, she literally, kills this dude, cuts his head off, feeds him to her dragon, very brutal, very cruel, very violent, without the crown's permission. And then because she does those things, Viserys then takes the tongues of 5 of his cousins. So we see how she's a lot more cruel. She's a lot more, quick to anger and things like that. So I don't know. I don't really like the dance. Black Army's appearing out of thin air, winning victory after victory, yet somehow the Greens win. I see your point there, but at the same time, I think it's more about Rhaenyra's inability to rule and also her inability to use the dragons correctly. If she had used the dragons correctly early on, especially early on in the war, she would have won instantly. But because she does these things, she's a terrible ruler. It kind of lets the Greens this is the thing. The Greens don't really win, Jesse. So they win, but they don't win. So let's put it that way. Like they do, but they don't. Because again, the line goes completely through Rhaenyra and Daemon. So I don't know. Yeah, that's the other problem, is that as soon as Rhaenys brings up that Laena's children, could marry Rhaenyra's, it kind of falls apart. And also, Vaemon, if he really was about keeping the line pure, right, he should have no problem with that. As soon as, Laena's children are married off to somebody else, right, like Luke, then bam, you're good. He shouldn't have any problems because the blood still goes through them. But you can tell that he obviously wanted it for himself, which was another one of his motivations. Oh, makes sense, Tony. Yeah, that's a big thing that in the books we're not actually sure what really happened. I think it's very likely they were Harwin Strongs. Like, I think it's like more I think in the book it's more like probably 70-30 they're Harwins, but in the show it's like it's 100%. Yeah. It's 100%. Yeah, Wiley, you make a great point. Robb and Rhaenyra are very similar, where they win a lot of battles, but they don't know how to rule. They make poor political decisions, don't manage the people well, type thing. Metal, that's a good point. But here's the other thing. Viserys should have just overruled Allison and been like, yeah, this is going to happen. Yeah. I would not say they suck as kings, Wiley. I would say Aegon wasn't great, but Viserys was actually pretty decent. Like, he was actually pretty good. He just didn't rule very long. He was Hand of the King for like a long time. It was like, I think it was like 40 years or something like that, and he was very good in that role. Yeah, well, okay. So Tony, let me put it this way, okay? It's not as easy to confirm in the book, and that's before they get like wedded. Like, we don't know what could have possibly happened during their wedding and how they like actually got on with each other. So, J Lord, this is how this is very major spoilers for the show, but this is how I will describe it. In theory, the Greens win between the whole Allison, Rhaenyra, and Aegon conflict, because Aegon is the one out of all those characters that ends up sitting the throne like after Rhaenyra dies. but he doesn't hold it. Like, instantly, the Starks, the Tullys, the Blackwoods, they all show up. And then by that point, Aegon II is already dead. So Aegon III then becomes king. So technically, the Blacks win because it goes through Rhaenyra's line. So that is kind of how that works. I mean, that's fair, Tony. I personally think they are Harwin Strongs, but I'm just saying what people have thought. Like, I made a video that's gotten a lot of traction about her kids, and a lot of people have suggested that maybe they are right, but that's why I'm saying 70-30. It's not because of my opinions, because I think they're Strongs. Tell me when the spoilers are done. They are done now. They are done. Hold on. They are done. Okay. So let's get back, because we have a lot to get through. I really haven't touched much of it, but so we get to this whole scene with Allison and this woman that apparently Aegon rapes, right? And at this point, I wasn't sure if Aegon had actually raped her, or if it was he harassed her in some way, like he tried to come on to her or something like that. And so for a second there, I was like, okay, where are they going with this? Because we already know, like, Aegon's kind of like a, he likes his women, and he likes to stare at them very awkwardly. And, we've gotten that in the last couple episodes. But then it's confirmed that, yeah, he did. Yeah, he raped her. And I'm just like, wow. That's not great. I will say, though, Allison gives her best Lena Headey, like, Cersei impression possible. Like, this is literally Cersei. Like, she's frightening the shit out of this girl and just blackmailing her and just kind of manipulating her. We understand her motivations, right? Because she doesn't want this stuff to get out and all this, and she pays her off. And I wrote down, pays her off, fair enough. And I'm just like, wow. Yeah. I don't, like, this is my thing. I'm a big Black supporter, but this show makes it very easy to not like the Greens. Like, if you're watching this, okay, let's put it from the perspective of if you're a female watcher or viewer of this show. Right? The guy they are trying to say is going to be king just got done raping a woman. Like, what female viewer is going to watch that and be like, yeah, I'm going to support the dude that likes to rape women? Even as a man, you shouldn't like that. But I don't know. It's tough. It's tough. Because it's like, I get that they're trying to make the two, and we're gonna keep going in circles, but they keep, because I'm gonna make a video on this, I think, this week. But and then they also aren't bringing in Daron, which is like the redeemable green. So it's like, you're just sitting here and like, why should we root for the Greens again? I don't know. I don't know. But I don't know. They feel like they're doing the Lannisters are the villains, but at the same time, they're trying to say that the Lannisters aren't the villains in the beginning, right? So when we think Jaime's a bad dude, like season 1 territory, they're kind of trying to lean into, oh yeah, the Lannisters are the bad guys, but they're also morally gray. I don't know. It's weird. Okay, so continuing on. So she also gives her moon tea, which is like, I'm just in here like, the way Allison has handled the situation, I feel like this wasn't the first time. Like, I feel like this has happened a lot. Like, I don't know if you guys got that vibe from the episode or this scene in particular, but it feels like this is not Aegon's first time, like, raping a woman. And yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that goes, but I want to know what your guys' thoughts on that are. Just hope they don't screw up Blood and Cheese and make it like Mysaria or Laris acting by themselves. Agreed. I hope they don't do that. Yes, Shot. That would have been a better way of showing the greens. That would have been a very good job of showing why the greens kind of have a not a right, but they have the perspective of we need to get rid of the dragons type thing. If you're going to lean into the Maester conspiracy type stuff. So Lady Gonzo, let me put it this way. I meant to say, think about the Lannisters. If Tyrion was a bad guy, like he wasn't morally great. Like think about him like he's just a bad dude, right? Think of Jaime as being the character that he doesn't get a redemptive arc. His hand never gets cut off. He's just kind of this guy that's cocky and all these things. It's kind of like that idea where it's like they're painting all the Lannisters as being bad, and they kind of are bad. And then we're supposed to say it's like morally great. That's what I was trying to say, trying to make an analogy of. Agreed, Metal. Oh yeah. He does rape Helena as well. So yeah, that's not great. Not great. Not a great guy. That is what Robert does to Cersei. Yep, and he's a dickhead for it. But also, you know, we're not even going to get into Robert and Cersei. Their whole relationship is just not great. Tyreek is still a good guy. That's fair. Tyreek Lannister, our number one wide receiver in fantasy football. The Hightowers would be hypocrites if that was the case. They own dragons themselves, and not to mention they know how to use dragons are to keep the peace. That is true, but they could kind of lean into maybe the Hightowers or the green side of it are more, they use more restraint with their dragons and stuff like that. And all that, and then just show that the blacks are more reckless with their dragons. They have Daemon, and they've already painted him as a villain. Show how reckless he is. Shows how reckless their kids are, maybe. That's kind of how you show a bit more of the difference between how each side would use the dragons. Moving on. Also, we see Allison go to confront Aegon, and I just thought the way this scene was framed very funny because it's like Aegon's just like Aegon reminds me in this situation where you have to get up for school and your mom's like, it's time to get up, and you're just like, no, one more hour. So that's the vibes I got from that scene, by the way. And Aegon is just, he's basically getting the full brunt of Allison right now, and you know, he should be getting this. He just raped someone, and she hits him. Kind of basically says, you're no son of mine. She's disappointed in him. And Aegon's like, you know, I'm trying to be this character that guy that you want me to be, but I'm just not that. And you kind of feel a little sympathy for him. And then at the same time, you're like, the dude just got done raping someone. Like, do I really feel sympathy for you? Not particularly. Also, something that I noted, it was a shame that we didn't get to see Aegon and Helena's like actual marriage. But it's just something you chalk up because of the time skip. It would have been cool to see their marriage, you know, having a little reception or whatever, but oh well, we didn't get to see it. But, you know, moving on. Also, I noted that it was a horrible reference to drop the no son of mine line. I thought it felt super forced, and I don't know. It just, and also Helena walks in at the worst moment possible. But yeah, I just didn't like that idea. Fair enough, what you guys are saying about the small folk and such. But we then cut to a scene with Rhaenyra, Daemon, and Allison. And I love, again, that we have the same type of conversation that we had with Viserys, where Daemon is just like, dude, I know what's going on. I don't give a fuck to play this game. Let's just get on with this, okay? You know why we're here. You're being all corrupt and stuff. Like, come on. I know what's going on. And Rhaenyra tries to be polite about it, right? Like she tries to kind of, not be as blunt and direct as Daemon is. And Allison's just sitting here kind of just going, yeah, I'm in control. What are you going to do about it? And I'm like, you know what? Fair enough, Allison, fair enough. But it was an interesting scene. Now, moving on, we get to Jace and Luke in the training yard. And this is kind of the introduction to Aemond, his new actor, basically. And this is a really good scene. I will say the fight kind of felt weird. It was weirdly sped up. I felt like it just felt really odd. It wasn't bad, but it just kind of looked odd to me. But yeah. And I also want to point out, everyone looks at, Luke and Jace, which I thought was a really good idea to not only say that, yeah, the Greens have been spreading these rumors. Like, they've been campaigning, okay? And I thought that was a good little scene. Also, I wanted to note here that Aemond One Eye gives me very much Blood Raven vibes, because it's weird how they're having this fight and then Aemond just kind of turns to where Jace and Luke are and like, well, hello, are you here to, do your training? It gives me very Blood Raven type eyes. Like, there's this whole idea that Blood Raven has one eye and like thousands or whatever. And that was very much the vibe I got from that, which I thought was a really cool little wink to the audience. And then also, to end that little scene out, you have the Velaryons showing up with Vaemond. All right, what you guys saying in chat? Maybe he and Joffrey. Oh no, him and Joffrey are actually very similar when you really think about who they are as characters. I'm talking about Joffrey from the main story, by the way. If you look at them, they're both kind of really, they only have a mother figure, right? Because I would assume Viserys was not a big prevalent part of their lives because, again, Allison was training them to not like the blacks, to be very violent with like Kristen Cole and stuff like that. And they're both kind of entitled. They're very, born into that rich thing. And I don't know if Joffrey really wanted the crown until he was kind of like forced onto it, really. But I don't know. It's an interesting thing to kind of talk about when you look at the two characters. I kind of agree, Matthew. We just don't see enough of Mysaria. Like, I just don't understand what's going on with her character at all because she's literally had like 3 scenes in the last like 6 episodes. Agree, J-Lord. I agree. Also, very good first line. I don't give a shit about tourneys. Kind of just establishes who this character has become in those 6 years. Sir Crispy Cole, as young as ever? Yes. I'm glad we didn't see much of him, though. Hate that guy. I'm glad Aemon beat his ass. Even though it doesn't particularly make a lot of sense. He does give Blood Raven? Yeah, that's what I thought. Hello, cousins. Are you here to train? Yes. It is nephews, by the way, but yeah. Back in Winterfell, Brandon. Yeah, so that is one thing though that A Song of Ice and Fire does a lot of the descriptions of how people look. The fact that Viserys didn't have a single conversation with any of his kids with Allison is insane. I kind of agree, but it kind of gives off like Robert Baratheon vibes as well. That is true, Tony. That is true. Young Wolf, watch it now. Oh boy. All right, so we then have Allison, Otto, and Vaemon's little talk, and hold on. So this is the thing that I thought was very interesting, is that Otto and Vaemon are having to persuade Allison that Vaemond should take the rule of the Driftwood throne. It's like, why are we convincing here? Like, it doesn't make any sense. This is my whole problem with Allison's character. We've already decided that Allison is a character that is in it for herself now, for her children. She is kind of a villain now. She wants war, basically. She wants to, you know, take all this away from Rhaenyra. It's been established already. Right? And you get an obvious thing where it's like, okay, we gain an ally, we take someone away from the black side of it, and it's just a slight subtle, oh, these kids, they're not legitimate either, and that Rhaenyra is kind of a whore. Why is Allison needing to be coerced into this decision? It doesn't make any sense to me. So, again, I loved this episode, but Allison really is a character I just don't understand in this episode. Because they're kind of going back on what they just established last episode. So, I don't know. It just isn't... And maybe they did this so that us as the audience maybe understand what's going on here. Or maybe Allison's playing kind of hard to get. But I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me. But yeah, that's kind of how I looked at that. And that is kind of all I really want to talk about in Scene 5. Kind of talked about it already with their kind of alliance thing that they were trying to do. Yeah, the Velaryons do know how to make an entrance, I will say. Yeah, Catelyn is to blame for Theon basically being let free to go to the Iron Islands. That is on Catelyn, not on Robb. In my opinion, anyway. Morally better, at least in a way, because they are really holding on to the fact that Allison and Rhaenyra... Yeah, and this is the idea here, is that, like, it's been so long at this point since Rhaenyra and Allison have actually been friends that it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It doesn't really work for me, because I'm just like, these characters have tried to kill each other, or at the very least, Allison rushed Rhaenyra, trying to take her son's eye. I feel like there's something missing with Allison's character. What happened to Allison that she's all of a sudden now more susceptible to maybe supporting Rhaenyra and being nice with Rhaenyra? It doesn't really make any sense. The last thing we hear from Allison in the last episode is, yeah, I'm able to win this, like, war type situation, and they're pushing towards war. What happened from the end of that episode to episode 8 that has caused her to kind of revert on some of those things? I don't see it. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I have a blind hatred towards the Greens, and I just can't see what they've been setting up. But I just don't see it. I don't see it. And that goes even further when we look at the last scene with Viserys dying. But yeah. So then we have Rhaenyra and Rhaenys. They talk in the God's Wood. There's a lot of emphasis put on this God's Wood. We see it like every episode, I feel like, almost. But they're kind of talking, and Rhaenys is going to declare herself as the ruler. Now, this is what I think is a little weird, is because in last episode, Rhaenys says to Corlys that, hey, why don't we make the heir Daemon and Laena's kids? Why don't we make them, the heirs, or one of them the heir, or over the other? But then in this episode, she says, I'm going to be the ruler. So I'm a bit confused as to why she doesn't want Laena's kids now there. So that's an interesting idea there. And then we kind of get the idea that Rhaenyra tells her, hey, what if we marry our children together, unite those bloodlines and all that stuff? And that makes sense from Rhaenyra's point of view. Also in this scene, we have the idea that Rhaenyra tells Rhaenys that she didn't kill Laenor, which again, I feel like this should have happened already, but whatever. Weird kind of idea. I did really like the scene from Rhaenys, though, how she understands what's happening. What is the political climate right now? How things are going to go, where Vaemond is probably going to be the person in charge, because that's what makes sense with who's in charge here. But I love that Rhaenys kind of understands the situation. Every step of the way, despite her making these awful choices, we do see that Allison is still conflicted every time. She's not devoid of a soul yet. I guess, but you have to, like, I am someone that, like, looks at what did we see last. And at no point at the end of that episode, or the back half of that episode, did I think Allison gave two shits about Rhaenyra anymore. Like, I get it. She was emotional because of her son. But she quite literally could have killed Rhaenyra, if not, trying to take an eye out of her son. She's sitting there with Otto plotting to start a war. Like, it doesn't... I don't know. Oh, I got you on Allison, Crease. During those 6 years, Allison turned to religion and wanted redemption about what happened on Driftmark, so she tries to be more pious, I guess. But they don't establish that. Like, they just show, oh yeah, she's doing a prayer or whatever, but, like, why? Like, narratively, why would you add that into a story where you're trying to build up to a conflict? If you didn't want Allison to be this kind of character, that's a villain type idea, don't establish that and shouldn't try to revert it off screen. You can't do that. That's the problem. You would think, Glossy, because it is a major point, right, of Daeron being in the story. That's what they said in the inside the episode. Okay, so let me talk about the inside the episode for a second. The inside of the episode likes to... This is why I don't watch the inside the episode. They like to bring up things that either was not established within the actual episode, or they try to say things that it just didn't happen. It just didn't happen. You guys, it's literally in the show. She was telling Aisha. So, she was ashamed of her actions because she lost her cool. Not because she doesn't hate Rhaenyra. She's saying that because she didn't keep up her idea there. And that's the whole idea there. And then not plotting a war. Otto literally tells her, you are now able to, you can win this now. Like, I don't know. Like, I get what you're trying to say. You're trying to say that, oh, she was very sorry for, doing these things. She's not sorry that she did them because she dislikes Rhaenyra. She dislikes that side of it. She hates it because she let it known to everyone. She showed her true colors, as Rhaenyra would state, to everyone in this room. She didn't play the calm, collected Littlefinger role correctly, right? That's why she's upset. And I don't know. I just don't think... I don't know. I have not gotten... I just don't see where the conflicted part of her character comes from. Real people are wishy-washy and conflicted. Okay. But the problem is, once you burn these bridges, real people are not conflicted anymore. Like, once you've done certain actions, it doesn't really go that way. Right? Like, it's like saying, like, okay, so personally, I had a best friend that I had for a couple years. Something happened between us. I don't think about that person anymore. I don't talk to that person anymore. I'm not conflicted that I want them back in my life anymore. And that's like on a minor scale. Allison's child lost an eye because of Rhaenyra's kids. She got so pissed off she wanted to straight up kill Rhaenyra or take the eye of her son. All while Otto, her father, is whispering in her ear that, yeah, we need to start a war in these things. Like, I get it. You can lose friends and get them back. But think about the extent or how high, the heights of where their problems came from. And if they're gonna come back, right? If they're gonna come back and people grow, that needs to be shown on that needs to be shown on screen. And it really wasn't. It was just something where it's like, oh, they see each other, and now Allison's cool with her again, or something. Like, from Rhaenyra's point of view, we can kind of understand why she would want to be a bit more friendly with Allison. Because, again, she's always been trying to avoid war. She's the one that's been kind of trying to make peace between the two sides. So we can kind of understand. And also, Rhaenyra is in the worst position right now. Right? Allison has control of the crown. So we can see a little bit more from Rhaenyra's side why a friendship renewing with Allison would make a bit more sense. That's another thing I want to talk about, by the way, Shot, is that I definitely think that they were, someone to a degree, I think it was probably Otto, was actually keeping Viserys alive for quite a while just to let Allison and the Greens kind of take more control over the throne to the state it is now. I think that's a decent theory. All right, so Rhaenyra then goes to Viserys, and this was a really it was a good setup, like, shot or scene for what was to come with Viserys' character in this episode. But two, it really shows us how Rhaenyra is feeling during this time, where Rhaenyra feels very like the walls are caving in, like she's trying to be the heir, but she just is struggling. The pressure is kind of overcoming her, and she's not in a good position, right? Like, she's just not. Like, she has the dragons, like we've said, and all these things, and she is the named heir, but she's lost all power at court, right? She's losing the protection of her father, which is something I was going to talk about in this scene, is that Rhaenyra kind of understands now that she is the one that has to kind of figure out her decisions. She does not have Rhaenyra or she does not have Viserys to protect her against, things that happen, right? So I thought that was interesting, and I really loved it. It was a heartbreaking scene between Viserys and Rhaenyra that kind of does get paid off. And also, this is something that I also thought about, is that Viserys gives me major, like, Khal Drogo vibes after he's kind of brought back, where he's just kind of there. He can't really do anything. And that's kind of where my whole idea or theory that he is being poisoned and being kept alive so that the Greens can rule in his name makes a lot of sense. Also, there's something else that kind of is disturbing to me, is that Otto is always the one there overlooking Viserys' like medical stuff. He's always the one there with like a maester or something like that, which is a little suspect to me. Fleming says, I don't think Allison actually wanted to be friends with Rhaenyra, but I think in a moment of weakness, she was willing to give up her attempt to usurp her. That's fair. Agreed, Shot. Agreed. I agree, Shot, with kind of what you said there. I think that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, also Viserys is super skinny. That was something I wanted to note on it. It just caught me off guard. All right, moving in. So now we have the succession in the throne room, and this is kind of talking about what we've been talking about all stream, where who is going to sit the Driftwood throne, right? It's a good prelude to the main conflict that is kind of approaching, but yeah. Now, this is, again, something that I thought was a little weird, because they've been building up that Allison is the one in charge or in control, but in reality, it's actually Otto. Like, Otto's the one sitting on the throne. He's the one kind of making the decisions or whatever. and they're all gonna present their cases, right? So Vaemon presents his case, and we've talked about his motivation a lot, so I'm not gonna keep reiterating it. But basically, he talks about the blood of the Velaryons and how that would die out. Then Rhaenyra goes, and as she's about to start speaking, Viserys walks in. And I noted here, I loved the look Otto gives. He's like, holy shit, this is impossible. But yeah, I loved that. And this is, to me, one of the greatest performances we've seen in all of Game of Thrones, all of House of the Dragon. I think the acting by Patty in this episode was top tier. It's right up there with like Peter Dinklage in like season 4 territory, like the trial scenes. Really amazing. And it was one of those things where you're like, given all of, Viserys' faults and things he's done in the past, this was a really nice, badass moment for Viserys, and I loved every bit of it. You can tell that this is taking every single ounce of his strength, and it's kind of his last rescue to Rhaenyra, and I loved that. Even though this is a major change from the book, I really loved that Viserys is going to get, a little bit of a heroic arc to end off, even though shit's going to hit the fan. He really was great in this. And I think it's even better when Daemon, picks up his crown and helps him back up onto the throne, which again, I was actually told I don't know. I think it was who told me. It wasn't Matthew. It wasn't you that Instagram DM'd me. Who did it? Somebody, I forget who did it, but one of you guys Instagram DM'd me that actually was not supposed to happen. The crown was actually not supposed to fall off of Viserys' head, and that was like Matt Damon went with it, and thought that was one of the best scenes of the entire episode. I really loved how it always, because this is one thing that we've always seen, is that Daemon does care about his brother Viserys, and that it was improvised. And that was a really awesome scene. It was a really good way to kind of conclude him going up to the throne. And the way this is kind of ended off here is that he asked Rhaenys, who would know better of what Corlys's, motivations were, who he wanted to sit the actual Driftwood throne. And Rhaenys, kind of last minute decision, decides, I'm going to go with Luke. And then she also very publicly, this is a very key point in why Rhaenys is very smart, is that she goes, hey, Rhaenyra also said we're going to join our houses. So she gains a ton off of this wedding where she knows it's going to go through because Viserys is there. So loved that scene. And then Vaemon just gets pissed. Or Vaemon, he's pissed. He's like, dude, Viserys, this is bullshit. All right. And he starts going after Viserys and stuff like that. And I love that Daemon is the one that kind of baits him into it. Like, yeah, say it. Say it. And I love that. Now, I will say I do like Vaemon's death much better in the book. I think it's done much better. It shows Rhaenyra's cruelty, more of her evilness, and I like that. I really like that. And Shot brings up another good thing that they haven't really done in the show, is that as Rhaenyra has more children, she starts to get very fat. She's not as attractive anymore. It's one of the big things where everybody's like, Rhaenyra was the darling of kind of the whole world, basically, or not the whole world, of Westeros, more or less. And as she gets older, that kind of falls apart. And then you also look at Allison, who stays very slender, very pretty. It's a really interesting contrast, and I really like that. So what ends up happening is Daemon kills him, which I didn't see that coming at all. He just kind of comes up behind him, kills him. We've talked about how I think Daemon is able to get away with it and stuff like that, so I won't really bring that back up again. But yeah, so that was kind of a major thing. Vaemon is now dead. And we head into... I was going to say we're about to head into the dinner, but we also have a shot on how... This is something that I think is really cool for Rhaenys, right? Is that Rhaenys overlooks Vaemon's body, and Rhaenys is just so immune to death at this point, right? Where she thinks she's seen her son charred body. She's seen her daughter die. She's seen a lot of bad in her life and seen a lot of death, and she just seems kind of immune to it at this point. I agree. I think if they had the anti-dragon motivation type thing from Allison, it would make a bit more sense. That's a good point, J Lord. That's a good point. I agree with a lot of things you're saying, Shot. I still think this is a very good episode. I think there was a lot of good acting in this episode and stuff like that. But there are I do have questions for the future of the show. I would agree with you guys. Agreed, Matthew. And that's one of Damon's kind of forgiving things is that he is kind of a family guy when it comes to his brother. And it's even, when Corlys starts talking bad about Viserys, Damon shuts it down immediately. So it kind of feels like a good I guess callback to that scene. Yeah, that is true. The Royces don't know that Daemon did kill Rhea. It's more like it's kind of like they kind of have a theory that he did, but they haven't really have any proof. Where were Vaemon's guards / retainers? They're probably off to the side, and then Daemon just kind of did it real quick. It's a spoiler-free review. Starman, for the episode itself, it is not a spoiler-free, no. And I will say, chat and or I at times do talk about the future of the books and even the show. So I would say no, Starman, it is not. So I would be very careful if you want to listen to this review. If you are really worried about spoilers for the future, I would be very, I would take some caution there. But then we get to the family dinner, and I've already talked about this early on in the stream, so we won't make a big thing out of it. But we have the iconic Allison versus Rhaenyra shot that I loved. It's a really great artist picture type thing that's done, but it was really awesome. I love that they did that. It was a really nice subtle nod to kind of book readers, and I love that. But I also love that they did a kind of a contrast between the greens and the blacks. So the prayer type thing seems very natural to the greens, while it seems foreign to the blacks. The blacks are not really with the seven, and I love that they did that. It really shows again the divide between the two sides. And I also kind of did love that Daemon smiles a little when Vaemond is mentioned by Allison. Thought that was funny. Okay, love your channel. I'm halfway through dance though, so gonna bounce. Sounds good, Starman. I appreciate the kind words, and yeah, I would probably bounce then too. But I hope you enjoy the rest of the dance, and yeah. Grease Goblin, do these directors give you the confidence to close the loopholes on what they've presented versus D&D? I don't. They haven't earned that for me yet. It's too early for me to really know that yet, because we're not really in the big part of the dance yet, or this whole story, so that a lot of things they're doing now, it's okay if they skip them. But really, the whole House of the Dragon and its legacy as a show will be determined more by the following seasons than this one. This season will always be looked at as the build-up season, so I don't think we can judge too much yet on them off of this season. I agree, Ian. But yeah. Moving on. I love that every shot of Aemond, he is just looking into your soul and analyzing you. I loved that. It just gives me Bloodraven vibes. Like every time looking at Aemond, he's just peering into your soul, and it's just dude, this guy is literally the devil, but just he's just there, in human form, and I love it. I love it. Aegon and Jace, we have Aegon just being a dick, as usual. And it's interesting to see their dynamic and setting up their rivalry, which I think was good. Also, again, Viserys' acting steals the show. He is trying so desperately to have a conflict not happen and for the two sides to be brought back, right? And yeah, it's really depressing, but it's just great acting. And this is what I think was interesting, is that instead of, like, this is what we keep talking about, how Rhaenyra and Allison, the two sides. Rhaenyra is the one to instantly toast Allison for taking care of her father and also apologizing to her for, I don't remember what she apologized for, but I'm assuming it's for, like, any problem she's caused, like lying or anything like that, which was good. And then we see Allison returning the courtesy and saying that she will be a fine queen. And I love that Otto is like, bitch, what the fuck did you just say? I ain't been manipulating people for like 30 years to hear your bullshit. Like, that's the vibes I got from that. And I just thought that was such a funny, like, good nod. I don't know. I thought it was really funny. Yes, metal. That is correct. It was kind of like the greens are kind of the rotten side, like, and then the blacks are kind of the, normal side, I guess. I agree with you, Shot, by the way, on Daemon murdering her. I think it, yeah, I agree with you. Because my thing of Daemon was always that he was more of a morally great character in the book, and he just is not. Helena's toast. We're going to get there, but yeah, it's a little rough. The leaks for next episode kind of piss me off. Well, hello, Billy Bob. I thought you weren't going to be in the stream today. I do not want to read the leaks, so you guys do not leak it to me. But that's not great. Yeah, I loved that idea as well, Glossy. That Viserys, and this is the thing that I think is awesome for Viserys, is that Viserys in his mind thinks that he has solved the problem. Right? I think it's a good way to kind of send Viserys off, right? But we then see kind of how Aegon is kind of antagonizing Jace, and Jace is kind of like he knocks on the table and then gets up, right? And I thought it was interesting because it shows how Jace is very competent on his feet, right? He quickly does a little toast and he gets through it, and all is fine, right? And then Helena just gets up and she's just like, she toasts Daemon's two daughters, right? And just like, yeah, it's not so hard. They just, ignore you. And I'm like, bro, I feel so bad for Helena. Like, I feel so bad, and it's only going to get worse for her. But then, our boy Jace is a Chad and dances with Helena, and I'm just like, Jace, you're a Chad. You're just a Chad, And again, facial acting from Viserys, I made a note of, was fantastic in this scene, and then Viserys is carried off. So, and then, so this is what I think is weird. Is like Luke is like actively laughing towards Daemon, or not Daemon, towards Aemond, and I'm just like, Luke, you're gonna laugh to this guy? He would chew you up and spit you out. Like, what are you doing? So then Aemond basically gives his toast, and he does the good old, they are strong. And I'm like, he had to. He had to. He had to. And I'm like, this is a great scene for me. I loved Aemond in this scene. I love the great foreshadowing with the face off of Daemon and Aemond. Thought that was fantastic. It was just, I really loved this scene particularly. I also wrote down that, again, we've talked about this to death in this stream, so I'm not going to talk about it anymore. But Allison being friendly with Rhaenyra kind of seemed forced to me, where she's like, Rhaenyra, you should, come back. And, Rhaenyra's like, yeah, I'll come back just on Dragonback. I want to get the kids home and stuff. And yeah, I wasn't a fan of that. Also, we see Mysaria shows her network of spies, which it just feels so weird. Her character feels very underdeveloped. Also, I didn't think I would make it to stream in time, but I was wrong. Well, I'm glad you're here, Billy Bob. Just let the poor old man die happy. Agreed. Also, Aemon did take that punch like a beast. All this added death, but we can't see Vaemon get eaten by Cyrex. Exactly. That's all I wanted to see. Luke signed his death warrant with that laugh. Agreed. Yeah, Clubfoot. Why was Clubfoot not in this episode? I didn't understand that. I didn't really get that. Also, yeah, Billy Bob. It was a very emotional scene for us lads. It's okay if you cried. It's fine. It's okay. It's okay. So the last little part of this is kind of Viserys dying, and Allison goes to give Viserys milk of the poppy. And Viserys starts telling Allison about the prophecy. Now, he doesn't think it's Allison. He thinks it's Rhaenyra. And he now thinks Rhaenyra is, I guess, the prince who was promised, which is a little weird, I guess. But so he starts telling all these things, and the thing is, Viserys doesn't really tell Allison the full prophecy, right? Or he doesn't really explain the prophecy to her. So Allison, who has just basically made peace with Rhaenyra, instantly hears Aegon and Prince and is like, "Oh, you want Aegon to be the king?" And I'm just like, yeah, that piece lasted like 3 seconds. Allison is like, she's hearing what she wants to hear in this way. Like she's like waiting for an excuse to just be like, yeah, Aegon's my guy. Like, there are so many Aegons in history, even up to this point. She came to the conclusion that she was talking about, you know, her son very quickly. But I don't know. I don't like the inclusion of the prophecy, personally. I don't like that it connects the two series together. I don't really like that basically people are going to say, oh, because of this prophecy, that's why the whole thing kickstarts. It's like, it should be more on, no, these two sides didn't like each other for a long time for valid reasons, and that's what kickstarted it. And then the death, like, it's really weird to have the two sides be fine with each other, and then one little event like the prophecy thing being said, and Allison takes it the wrong way, and that's going to kickstart it, right? So, again, this is going to be big spoilers for the audience, right? I want you guys to think about what happens, right? Like, what is going to happen. Again, big spoilers. So if you don't want to hear spoilers, I would, what's going to end up happening is Viserys dies, right? Allison is then going to keep his body and keep him dying a secret, and then plot to put Aegon on the throne, right? So the whole idea here is, okay, we just got done seeing Allison say that, yeah, you're going to be a good queen, having peace. And then because she hears a prophecy that mentions Aegon, she then decides, okay, let's just betray everything I just said. Like, I don't know. It's a rough kind of turnaround, right? Where it makes sense from the character from episode 7, but I don't know. And Lady Gonzo, what you were saying about it saddens me this fandom has lost all its faith until I personally have not lost faith in them. I think they've made a lot of questionable decisions when it comes to time skips. I know it's a very hard thing to adapt it, and I still think it's going to be good the way they conclude this story, but they also have done things that I think are very questionable. Like I said, I have rated this episode a 9. Even with all the gripes I have talked about in this episode, I still think it's a very good episode. I think it's a 9 out of 10. It's a very good episode. And I'm someone that tends to, and I know I do this, I tend to talk about a lot about the positive and not a lot about the good. Right? So, and that's because I genuinely love this time period. I love this series. I want it to do as good as possible. So I talk a lot about the negatives because I want those to kind of be fixed so this series can be as good as they possibly can be. It's the same thing with Rings of Power, except I just hate that show now. But with all that being said and all the negatives I said in this episode, or this stream, this is a very good episode. Right? I thought this was a very good episode. I think it was probably the best episode of the series. Yeah. But Viserys then painfully dies. It was very sad. And that's kind of the conclusion of the episode. I also agree with you, Shot. I mean, I've said this multiple times, is that they've made Westeros feel very small in this show. Right? I think it was 50-50. Deep down, there was some small seeds of goodwill with Rhaenyra and Allison, but most of it was a show of comfort. So that's what I initially thought as well, is that this was kind of all of a show, right? But then when Allison goes out of her way to kind of say, Rhaenyra, are you going to come back, and trying to be nice to her, that was Allison trying to be a good person, right? Because Viserys wasn't there anymore. So it wasn't like she was, like, why would she at this point lie? And they were still trying to be good with each other even after Viserys left. So it wasn't a lie, really. That's what I thought it was going to be. That would have made more sense if all these characters are lying and they're putting on a show for Viserys. That would have made a lot of sense. But that wasn't really what was here. It's like they were trying to do a last-ditch effort to stop it. But even like as you're saying, Lady Gonzo, I'd probably give the episode or the season as a whole so far like an 8 out of 10. I think let me go back to my rankings of the episodes. Yeah, I've only had one episode that was below an 8 out of 10. I had episode 3 as a 7 out of 10 because I really did not like how they treated the Stepstones and Daemon's character specifically in that episode. But every other episode I've had is an 8 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10. Yeah, man. So that's what's really interesting to me about that is it seems like there was goodwill there, but then one little thing and Allison is willing to just get rid of it. So I'm not sure there. Not sure. Also, Paxton, I am done now. I kind of forgot to tell you. But yeah, I am done. But that is going to be that. Okay, so now let's finish off the stream. Let's look up the insight for next episode, or the preview. So I won't be responding to chat here for a second. Let me turn on my headset. I rarely ever use my headset anymore, but I need to turn it on. All right, so we have about a minute 14 little thing. We have a shot of the Iron Throne. Okay. Interesting shot of them basically having the Green Council. Viserys is dead. Very eerie feel to it. Okay, so Allison then straight up says he wished for Aegon to be king. So we know that this is just a either she's lying in the scene or she did very much misinterpret what Viserys was saying and she kind of believed what she wanted to believe. Scene of the small folk, basically, and a lot of lords and I'm assuming, right, bowing to Aegon. And then also them kind of saying, you know, we're not going to let his death get out until we need it to. And then also the mission of the twins, the Kingsguard being set in motion. So that'll be interesting. Okay, interesting. So the Clubfoot's back and he's got some secrets. Not really a whole lot else I have to say about it. They're just kind of setting up that there's going to be a conflict because of Viserys' death. I thought Aegon's crown looked okay. I didn't look at it for too long, but I thought it looked okay. I agree with you, Shot. I agree with a lot of that. And no problem, Paxton, no problem. Aegon goes from sexual assaults to the throne in one go. Yeah, yeah. I think twins are going to track down Aegon while he's out Aegoning. Yeah. I won't spoil. It's not really that big of a spoiler, but it's a little interesting thing. Hashtag justice for Lord Beesbury. Yeah. Oh, that makes sense, Billy Bob. That makes sense. All right, so that is my episode 8 stream and all of that. So I hope you guys enjoyed the stream. We'll be back with episode 9's breakdown next Monday. We are going to also be doing Rings of Power Friday. Dear God, it's the last stream for that show. I'm very thankful because that show is just... We complain a lot about this show, but that show is genuinely just dog shit. I just want to point that out there. I'm going to have some videos up on the channel about the Maesters and Robert's Rebellion, I think up probably tomorrow. Going to have a Purple Wedding video up, I think, Thursday. So we're going to be talking about, like, was Tyrion the target and just doing a breakdown of just what happened there. And then we're also going to be doing a video, I think, on Allison's character arc as a whole on Saturday. So